Mic check. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome, current and future leaders. This is the Fed PM Pro Thursday night live stream. Talk about all things federal program management, government contracting, even some stuff around emerging technologies. So whatever is new and interesting at the time, we'll be talking about on these Thursday night live streams. So appreciate you stopping by and sitting with us. The subject for tonight, I actually have a nice story to tell you about when it comes to subcontractors, partners, suppliers, all of those kinds of relationships that we have to build as program managers, and can be fraught with challenges, especially if you're just coming up and learning and maybe are not familiar with all these different types of relationships and how they work. And even things like on a regular basis, you will be contacted for the rest of your life by companies just every week trying to work with you, sell you something, and those kinds of things. So we can go through a little bit about what those differences are. What is a subcontractor? What's a vendor or supplier? And what's a partner? They're all slightly different, and there are nuances around all. And then at the last part of the stream, we're going to talk about small businesses. Because in federal government contracting, you are going to deal with small businesses quite a bit. In general, there are a lot of contracts that happen with the federal government that require you to have a small business portion of the delivery. So essentially, you're given some sort of percentage via the contract vehicle or via the specific task order itself that you have to try to hit, where your small business partner or small business subcontractor is delivering X% of the contract. So you're going to deal with these things all the time. And we're going to go into all the different types of small business categories that you're going to have to deal with. There's a whole bunch of acronyms here that I think will really help out. So before we get started, I'm going to go through our standard rules of engagement. So the ground rules for the AMA, certainly for anybody that's listening on the live stream, please feel free to ask any questions that you might have. Usually it'd be, if they're on topic, that's great. But if you've got something else that's burning that you'd like us to talk about, that's what I'm here for. The only purpose of this live stream and these videos is to help you as an up-and-coming program manager. I remember I would have liked to have these kinds of things when I was up and coming, so that's what we're here for. And not only that, we're here to kind of learn from each other. So there's, if you are an experienced program manager and you're watching and you see somebody ask a question in the chat, feel free to chime in because, again, as we go through the ground rules, you'll see why. We want everybody to be nice. There are trolls that pop into these live streams sometimes, so please just ignore them. Also, I'll do my best if there's something happens in the chat where you get the bots that come in, I'll do my best to get rid of them, but also please ignore them. We really do want to support each other. That's the whole point of this, especially for folks that are considering going into program management or maybe are just starting out. It is a very rewarding career path, but also super challenging, and you have to know a lot of stuff. And if we can help you on that, that's what we want to do. My answers are completely based on my own personal experience. So for those of you out there that are watching, you could have completely different experiences, and they are completely valid. And you may be able to share with us your experiences, and all of us could learn because it's entirely possible that I could go my entire career and never experience some of the situations that those of you out there that are program managers have experienced. So this is a great opportunity for us to share, and these different perspectives, I think, will help all of us grow. So please feel free to share, and please understand that my information is coming from about 20 years of government program management. I said on a previous video, I tend to be in the civilian space, but I've also supported some DoD work, and I tend to deliver in the IT space. So as you can see, there's kind of categorizations there of where my information is coming from and my background. So if you've worked in a different field and you've had different experiences, we'd love to hear from you. These videos and live streams are not sponsored by anyone, by any employer, a customer, past or present, and everything that I'm expressing in these are my thoughts only, and not related to any work that I've done in the past specifically. And I'm not going to be answering questions that are sensitive and also questions that are related to like business questions, right? Like contracts specifically, opportunities, companies, agencies that I may have worked with. We won't touch on any of those things. We just want to speak kind of in program management generalities. And then, of course, I always reserve the right not to answer a question, just to keep this stream fun and going. So I really appreciate you all stopping by, and I'd love for us to have fun. So if you got any questions, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so welcome everybody to our live stream tonight. We're going to be talking about subcontractors, partners, and suppliers, all of the crazy relationships that we as program managers have to navigate. So we'll be going through what these things are, and I'll also be sharing why I thought this might be a good topic for tonight with some of my past experiences and the crazy things that I've done in the past. On these live streams, I always make sure that I put up a TLDR. As program managers, many of us do executive summaries. So I'm sure that, you've had to do an executive summary for a project or a program. I always put these up at the front so you can pause it here, read, see if this is what you're interested in or want to go through or looking for. And that way we can, if it's not, you can click off and come and go see another video or save some time, because I know your time is precious and this is important. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about subcontractors, suppliers, partners, small businesses, and some of the categories of small businesses. So if you're interested and this is something that sounds like it's going to be helpful for you, please sit back, relax, and we'll go through it. Okay, so subcontractors, partners, and suppliers. I have to apologize. My wife always comments when I get comfortable, I kind of sit up and ease towards the camera. I know that can be disconcerting, so I apologize, but bear with me. I just have to, get comfortable. I know many of you probably sit a lot during the day, so you know where I'm coming from when you got to kind of shift and get comfy and get settled in. So I apologize for that. Okay, so why did I want to do this particular one tonight? So I've had some crazy situations related to subcontractors, partners, and suppliers. When I first started in program management, as you've heard me mention before, I have about a 20-year span of kind of program and project management that I've been involved with. And so I started out small, like we all do, with small projects. And I think my first program had less than 20 people in it, all the way up to, now my last program had 300, and there's 700 plus that I'm working with now. But what I've learned through that process, is what we want to share here. And one of the pieces that I learned was you don't get a lot of good training on the relationships that you're going to be working with as a program manager. At least I didn't, and you may not either, because one of the first situations that I ran into, we had some small business subcontractors. And this was the first big win that I'd had. This was going to be a several hundred person program. So I was super excited, ready to go. And as part of the, transition in process, I built out this really detailed, list of all of the staff and where they were going to be going. And then I did this huge, Excel spreadsheet of which subcontractors should have the particular staff. And there were several small businesses. I think at the time there were probably 5 or 6 different small businesses that we were working with. And we'll talk about why you pick certain small businesses. But with those 5 or 6, I partitioned the staff, and I did all kinds of, machinations to make sure everybody had the right percentages and all these other things. And we get to the first subcontractor that I call to say, okay, here's the folks that you have, here's where they're located, and here's what they're going to be doing. And literally maybe 5 or 6 minutes into that conversation, the subcontractor says, well, you've given us staff in like Washington State or something. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, well, we don't have authority to work in Washington State. And I said, you don't have what? And they're like, no, we don't have authority to work there. We're out of Virginia, and we can also work in Florida. And I said, I don't even know what you're talking about. That's a real thing. A lot of these small businesses are located out of specific states and will only deliver services in specific states. This is a massive contract, and I knew nothing about that going into that kind of design. So I'd spent weeks putting together this staffing plan, and it was perfect. And now we had days to rework that staffing plan and understand where all of these subcontractors could deliver services. And it was chaos, so you can imagine it all worked out in the end, but that was one of the most stressful, times I've ever had. And it was simply because I didn't realize, what these small businesses, had to offer, and also some of the challenges and limitations that they might have. And those are things that I think all of us need to learn. So if you're going through that now and you have small business partners and things like that, always be sure to ask where they can deliver those services so that you don't try to give them staff and personnel in a state that they can't provide that service in. So that was the background for why I wanted to talk about subcontractors and partners and all these things, because I think early on you really need to know some of these characteristics and qualifications for all of these different relationships. And I call them relationships because essentially that's what all of them are. There are different kinds of relationships between your company and another company, another entity, a consulting firm. It could be, any number of things. But essentially, where this comes into play is that as a federal, government contractor, there is a prime contractor who wins the work and is responsible for delivering the contract. Then underneath that are a whole host of potentially other companies that come in as what they call subcontractors or suppliers or partners. And a lot of times you have to manage all of those vendors to deliver this one service up to your customer. So it's really important to know how that process works, but that's where subcontractors come into. And as I've got here, it's generally, you get into a relationship, you're the prime contractor, and you might be looking for specialized services. So a lot of times with government contracts, they can be really broad and they can have specialized requirements that you may not have in your company. And so a lot of times when that happens, and even if you're a large business, there are going to be potentially companies out in the marketplace that are either boutique or specialized and really good in a particular technology or capability. It's a smart thing to find those companies and get them on your team, because the goal of having subcontractors is to increase your probability of winning the award of the contract. And it's called your P-win. And many of you have probably heard of this. But you want to bring in additional companies only when it can increase your probability of winning that bid. And that's generally what you want to do. Now, there's a whole host of other reasons why you might have other subcontractors that come in. You could have a situation where bringing that subcontractor in to your team actually gets them off of the street, so to speak, as a competitor. Those things happen too, where you know this other company is going to be going after the same work. You talk to them and say, hey, I know you're going after the work. We're going after the work. If I have you as a subcontractor, we got a better shot of winning. And that way both of us can provide and deliver those services. So there's a whole host of reasons why you work with these subcontractors. But again, for the most part, you're trying to increase the probability of you winning that contract. And at the bottom of the slide, I have a very important note. And this is, as a disclaimer, I'm not a contract specialist and you see sub K, that's a abbreviation for subcontractor. And so I'm not a contract specialist or a subcontractor specialist. And I've done procurement, but I have never been a procurement manager. It is critical when you are working on these kinds of things that you talk to these folks that work in your organization. For the most part, you're almost always going to have somebody that's responsible for those things. And the contract specialist can tell you about what kind of relationships you can enter into and how that process works. Because what may happen is that if you are coming in and you've been chosen to run a program after award, meaning the company has already won the program, all of that negotiation of who's going to be the partners and things may have already happened. And you may not have any role in it whatsoever. You're kind of handed this, thing, and it says, here, you've got these 6 subcontractors, go take care of it. But if you're able to be a part of that from the proposal process all the way through award, a lot of times you'll have a much better feel for what these companies specialize in, what their capabilities are, what they can deliver, to add value to your customer and those kinds of things. It's really great to be a part of that proposal process, because then you really understand why these folks were chosen, why these companies were brought in, and what benefits it can be delivered to the customer by having them on your team. So again, it's really important, if you're brought in after the win, to have a really good long discussion with the account team and understand, well, why did we choose this particular partner or subcontractor? What do they deliver that we need to focus on? And then at that point also, get an idea of where they can deliver work and those kinds of things, so that as you're doing your staffing plan for the delivery of the contract, I'm not going to give them work in Washington State. We'll never forget that one, right? So make sure that if you're coming in and you've been chosen to come in after an award of a contract, take some time, find the account manager. There's almost always an account manager involved or an executive that is responsible for the win, and ask them some questions, get some background information, because it'll help you, again, do your, staffing plan. So let's go through a couple of the designations that we have for relationships that we deal with, and then we'll go into small businesses specifically, because there's some interesting caveats to small businesses in federal government contracting. So as I mentioned before, subcontractors a lot of times are brought in for specialized capabilities, right? They may deliver certain technologies, certain services that you as a prime, maybe don't have in your wheelhouse in your company. And so you bring a subcontractor in to help deliver those pieces, right? The prime contractor, you as the PM, are responsible for managing that subcontractor, okay, and ensuring that they're meeting any SLAs, service level agreements that you might have on the contract. If they're delivering specific projects, you need to make sure that all the milestones of the project are being met, because you as the prime contractor are delivering these things. So it's really important that you understand the service that's being provided by your subcontractor, and that you're actively managing it, meaning you're aware of what's going on and what they're delivering, because it's your and your company's reputation on the line as the prime contractor. If something goes south on that contract, it doesn't matter who the subcontractors were, it matters who the prime was. And you are going to be the one delivering that prime delivery to the customer, and you're going to be responsible. So make sure you understand what it is that they're doing. You have a close working relationship with them. I have had so many great experiences with small businesses. And a lot of times they're very hungry, and they want to do the best they possibly can. A lot of times it also gives you an opportunity, if you're a larger business, to mentor and help them, improve either internal processes or, help them get larger contracts down the line. So there's a lot of opportunity to grow these small businesses, and it's really important that we do that. But you also, like I mentioned earlier, might have a large business subcontractor. And you may, you may have to divide the work. So when you get into a relationship with a subcontractor, you generally have something that's called a teaming agreement, right? And this is an agreement between the two parties about, hey, what are we asking you to do? How many people, or what is your work share that we've negotiated? And a lot of times you may or may not have that. You don't have to have that for a teaming agreement, and honestly, as a prime, you'd rather not. And I'll tell you, because down the line you want to be flexible in how you deliver those services. So if you're a PM, you want to, number one, make sure you understand if there are any teaming agreements with a subcontractor and what those teaming agreements say. So you need to be aware of them, and then you also need to deliver any agreements on work share. So if it says this subcontractor A is supposed to get 10% of the work, you need to understand, is that 10% of the people? Is that 10% of the revenue? What do I have to deliver, and make sure that they are receiving and being able to essentially deliver those people or get that revenue in order to stay compliant with our teaming agreement. It's going to be on you as the PM to be able to manage that and make sure that that happens. So again, the teaming agreement is a lot of times what is put forth, as the beginning of the relationship, and then you get a subcontractor agreement, which a lot of times you can, again, specify things like, the work share and specify a statement of work. You may deliver a statement of work to the subcontractor that says, I need you to do these things, and they have to respond back with, yes, we're gonna do it. And there's this whole thing about pricing and stuff, and I won't go into all of those elements tonight because we could be there forever. I just want to describe the basic categories of these different kinds of relationships. So that's generally what you do. You have a subcontractor that is going to deliver some sort of capability or service. You generally want them to increase your P-win. And a lot of times there's some sort of agreement with the subcontractor that will include what kind of work they're going to be doing, and also potentially what kind of work share you have in an agreement with them. So again, all those things are pieces you need to be really aware of. And as I mentioned earlier, you have to talk to your contracts managers, your subcontracts managers, your procurement leads. Any of those people can help you work through the specifics of those contracts and documents that you're sharing with your subcontractors. You just need to know what they are. And a lot of times you're going to need help filling them out and going through them, because number one, you as a PM may not have the authority to enter into that relationship on behalf of your company, right? So a lot of times you're going to need someone that has that authority to build those and create those contractual relationships with your subs and suppliers. So again, just be aware and be very careful about communicating to other companies about what your company is going to be doing. It's always better to have negotiations and discussions about specific subcontract or supplier agreements coming from a part of your organization that is authorized to have those discussions. So a lot of times it might be the contracts manager, or you might have a specific sub-K manager that you go through, and they are the ones that communicate to the subcontracts manager for the small business. So again, you need to just be aware of these different capabilities within your own company, where they reside, how to get to them, because it's going to be invaluable when you've got questions that you go through them first and cover the legal aspects of these relationships, because a lot of times they're way beyond, what we might know of as program managers. So you got to stay on the right side of the legal discussion on all of these pieces. So that's a broad definition of a subcontractor. Now, a supplier, a lot of times, for several contracts that I had, we had procurements, we had buys that we had to do for the government, where the government wanted to procure things like, it might be anything from like computers to vehicles to whatever. The government needs to buy that as part of the contract, and you have to go out and source it and buy it. And there's a whole process behind that is governed a lot of times by FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations. You heard me talk about that in the last video. That's one of the reasons why we need to be aware of what the FAR is. And there are an enormous number of rules, which is why when you want to do a procurement, you get your procurement shop involved, because that's what they do. They know and understand all those clauses and all the legal requirements for doing a procurement, and they can help you walk through it, because usually there's some requirement for competition. There's usually an assessment of something called price reasonableness, which means that did you look at and get the best price for the government, and all of those things you have to coordinate with your procurement lead to make sure you're staying on the right side of the law. And a lot of times, like I said, what we would call a supplier, we don't necessarily enter into a subcontract agreement with. We simply provide them a purchase requisition. So you might say, I want to buy 100 computers from you, supplier A, and you'll provide them with a purchase requisition. And that purchase requisition is what you use to acquire those goods, and then you can transfer them to the government or use them on your contract. All of those different things. That's where a supplier comes in, is they're generally responsible for providing goods or materials that are required to perform your contract. So they can do, and again, these suppliers, as you heard me earlier, can be incredibly broad. I mean, it could be anything from delivering parts and pieces of something that your contract may need to put together to, completely delivered goods. So again, you may have one supplier, you may have hundreds of suppliers on contracts. And I'll say the same of subcontractors. I think I may have mentioned this in a previous video too. I certainly know of contracts that have dozens of subcontractors that they have to manage. So these numbers can be huge, and you need to understand what each of those relationships is, and make sure you're doing what needs to be done to address those relationships and keep them going. So let me go back to our PowerPoint. Okay. So we talked about subcontractors. We talked a little bit about suppliers, partners. A lot of times you'll hear subcontractors and partners used interchangeably. Again, it's something. It's an entity and an organization that collaborates with the prime contractor to provide a solution to the government. A lot of times the tweak is that these partners might do more solutioning with you to deliver a product or service rather than necessarily being on your team and delivering what we would consider O&M, operations and maintenance work, or just delivering bodies. So a lot of times there may be technology development involved and system integration. You'll also see that these can be formed, again, through a host of different ways, including things like teaming agreements. Like I mentioned earlier, you can still do a teaming agreement with a partner like you can a subcontractor. You can also do things like joint ventures, and there's a host of contractual arrangements that you can get into with these various partners. So again, be aware, they don't have to be a subcontractor on your contract. You can create these other relationships to continue to deliver capabilities and services. But a lot of times you'll hear partner and subcontractor maybe incorrectly used almost interchangeably. So just be aware that a lot of times these partners provide a range of services rather than what I would consider like direct labor to the contract. And again, they're usually involved in more solutioning of the products and services rather than, and they can also deliver, but they more than anything else are more than a regular subcontractor, are solutioning experts or technology experts in a specific field. So that's a lot of times where you'll get this kind of partner situation. Like you might work with a large telecom company, and they're not necessarily a supplier like AT&T, and you may have them as a partner on the contract where they're delivering large scale IT services to the government through the relationship that you have with the contract with the government. But again, like I said, I'm not a contracts expert, so make sure that when you're entering into these things, if you hear these terms, talk to your contract specialist, your subcontractor, managers, procurement leads, whatever, to make sure that you're understanding what are these folks asking me? What kind of relationship are we trying to get into here? So as I mentioned earlier, you are going to get contacted constantly as a program manager, particularly when you get into the larger contracts all the time, like weekly. You're going to receive emails and calls from companies that want to, either become a subcontractor or, connect with your team to deliver goods and services. So you need to be aware of, what they're providing to you and whether you're interested or not, because you're going to have to deal with them all the time. So for example, like my rule of thumb for, whether or not I wanted to engage with a subcontractor was the subcontractor or partner bringing something to the program that we couldn't deliver, that we knew the customer was interested in. And if that was true and we could not build it in-house, and you're generally going to have to do a buy versus build, kind of analysis on some of this stuff, is, can I deliver it in-house with my own staff easier, or is there, is it better to buy it? And if it's better to buy it, you might want to get a subcontractor, to come into your organization as an agreement and deliver that service. And again, this happens while you're delivering your program. So you'll have a group of subcontractors and partners when you start out, and those can change throughout the life of the contract. You can bring new suppliers in. You can drop other suppliers and even subcontractors off of the contract as you go through, because some of these contracts can be 10 years long. So in a lot of cases, there's going to be change. So you need to be aware. But getting back to the situation where they're constantly calling you, my rule of thumb, like I said, is they need to be able to deliver value that I can't deliver on my current from my current team, right? And that's the only time I'll ever engage with those discussions. And one of the challenges is you're going to get so many that's going to be really hard to respond to each one. You may even want to just create a form letter that says, thanks, I'm just not interested at this time, to at least give them some feedback and say, no, we just don't have time to talk about it. I'll keep your name available in case we need something like this in the future, and just keep a form letter kind of ready to go, an email ready to go to address a lot of these questions as they come up. But you're going to get a ton, so just be aware of these kinds of different designations that you'll hear throughout the entire process, and because you'll constantly have to deal with them. So what about small businesses though? Okay, so I kept this as a completely separate deal because the vast majority of my subcontractors were small businesses. So in the federal government space, like I mentioned earlier, there are contractual requirements that come from the federal government to utilize small businesses, which I think number one is a great thing, and number two, I think it does actually benefit the government to have these varying capabilities growing up and these small businesses succeeding in this marketplace. So, for example, your contract or contract vehicle may have a stipulation clause in it that says, you need to deliver this with 30% small business subcontracting labor or revenue, right? So it says 30% of this delivery needs to be small business. And in that case, a lot of times you may be a small business, by the way. And so if you're the small business prime, a lot of times, again, you're covering some of those check boxes. And I will say this too, these specific percentages that are on these contracts are generally called set-asides, which means that the government is intentionally encouraging small businesses to engage and work with the government. So it gives you an opportunity to jump in there and be right at the top of the list because it has to be small businesses. And we're even going to talk about more specific characterizations within the small business space that, again, they also set aside for. So if you are a PM with a small business, two things. One is if you're the prime, fantastic. You may also have other small businesses that you're working with, because a lot of times with a small business, you don't have the breadth of capability across a range of services that maybe a large would have. So sometimes you might be the prime as a small business with a large partner that comes in, and they may have, a lot of times in a situation like that, the small business would have like 51%, and then the large business would have 49% of the work. And that allows you as a small business to use the processes and procedures and capabilities of this large to not only improve your business and train your people up, but also it expands your capabilities dramatically. So you can have a relationship like that where as a small business, you're delivering a contract as the prime with a large business behind you, or you might be delivering it with several other small businesses, where you collectively, you as the prime with them as subcontractors, but you might also have to manage small businesses being a small business. So again, the designation for small business is provided by the Small Business Administration, okay, and it meets size standards that are specifically set by the SBA. And in that situation, it's dependent on the industry that you're working in. So a lot of times these numbers can vary depending upon which industry you're a part of, whether it's IT or whether it's construction. And a lot of times the standards can be based on things like the average number of employees that the customer has, that the company has, or maybe even things like the annual revenue. So the Small Business Administration makes a ruling on a business to determine whether it's actually going to be classified as a small business. So again, your company, if you're a small business, has gone through that process. And especially if you're going to go into government contracting, you have to have that stipulation and proof that you are a small business. And so you're going to have to work with the Small Business Administration to do these things. And it's funny because you'll hear the term, they graduated out of a small business. And I was actually with a company at one point that did that, where it started out as a small business and it was growing during the contract, and it started to exceed the revenue targets that in our industry took us over the threshold to from being a small business to a large business. So you can graduate out of a small business category, which is great because then the small business is growing, which is exactly what you want. So again, keep in mind, the small business designation is provided by the Small Business Administration. There won't be any question, and they will generally have to provide, proof that they're a small business, but that will be worked out through contracts. And again, you heard me mention before, small businesses can be primes, they can be subs, they can be suppliers, they can do all kinds of things. But again, the federal government in a lot of cases sets aside a certain percentage of contracts that need to be fulfilled by small businesses. So it's really important to, if you're a small business, to know which contracts that are being let are small business only or have small business set asides, because you obviously want to target those. because you're, again, competing with smaller companies. You have a better shot. Your P-win is better. And also in certain situations where there is contracts that might be a little bit larger, if you have a mentor-protege relationship with, like, let's say a large business, which I recommend, we certainly, the several large businesses that I've been with have small businesses that they mentor and help to grow up through the process of delivering services to the federal government. And a lot of times that's kind of a pre-made team. It's perfect because you've already been working with this small business, you're comfortable with them, you trust them, and they're able to be partners to you as you go through many of the opportunities that you go after as a large. Now, I will say this, on the large business side, it can be challenging sometimes to work with a small business. Now, again, as I mentioned before, the vast majority of experiences I have had with small businesses have been fantastic. And I've gone through multiple, different types of contracts, a lot of times with the same small business going with us, because I just trusted their ability to deliver. But you also have to keep in mind that they are a small business. And so they may not have, a depth of a back office. And when I say back office, like, procurement capabilities or even contracts managers, sometimes I've actually, been working directly with the CEO of the company, and, they may not have a huge staff to help them do, all of the stuff, right? So a lot of times there might be a situation where it may take a little longer for a small business to deliver something, or they just might not have the capacity to do something like a large procurement or something like that. So again, keep these things in mind, and absolutely no shade being thrown at small businesses. As I've said, over 20 years, I've had the vast majority of partners that were small businesses were fantastic and great to work with. Like I said, a lot of times those small businesses are hungry. They're doing everything they can to grow, and they are going to be a focused and dedicated partner delivering services with you to the government. So definitely, obviously recommend that. So there, as I mentioned earlier, there's a certain percentage of contracts that the federal government has to compete each year that have some sort of small business set aside. And those percentages change. It's something that it would behoove you to know. But even within the small business space, there are a number of very specific categories that fall within small businesses. These categories are all small businesses. So you start out at the top with small businesses, and then you can actually demarcate even smaller categories under these small businesses, and they can be specific set aside. So we're going to talk about those in the next slide. And again, I cannot stress this enough. When you are working out partnerships and things like that for your contract, you need to know these kinds of things: the percentages of small business that is required for your contract, and then the percentage of these subcategories that might be required, because I've had to manage multiple subcategories to make sure that we hit our numbers across the subcategories within our subcontractors. Okay, so let's go through. We're basically going to go through 5 of these subcategories. And again, this isn't exhaustive. This is just to give you a heads up that these things are out there, and you want to get smart on them. And you also want to, again, work with your contract specialist to understand what the relationships are that your company has made with these small businesses, and making sure that you're hitting your numbers and you're providing work share to these small businesses that gets you to hit the targets for your contract or contract vehicle. Okay. So the first one is, so these are subcategories of small businesses. And on each of these slides, I just have at the top what a small business is. Just remember that, again, these already have to have a designation from the Small Business Administration that they're a small business. The first category is SBB. And the reason I put these acronyms up here is because that's how they're always specified. You'll just hear, we need an SBD, we need a WOSB, we need a SDVOSB, right? That's the nomenclature that you'll hear. So you need to be able to, kind of fill in what do those acronyms mean and what are they talking about. So small and disadvantaged businesses, okay? Again, all of these subcategories are also designated and certified by the Small Business Administration. And you will definitely know when a company approaches you, because a lot of times, even in their signature lines, like the CEO will have, these various designations at the bottom of their title. And as you're negotiating with them, it is a selling point specifically because if you've got a contract that requires these, you need to find these small businesses that have these particular designations from the Small Business Administration. Okay, so for a small disadvantaged business, it has to be owned or controlled by one or more individuals who are designated to be socially and economically disadvantaged. And when I say owned or controlled, they must have at least a 51% stake in the business. So the individual that is essentially the CEO or has the 51% stake in the business must be in a designated socially and economically disadvantaged category per the Small Business Administration. So that's where this small disadvantaged business designation comes in. And again, they would, if you have an SDB subcategory on a contract, so maybe you have something that says full and open, which is large businesses. So you may hear the words full and open. That generally means anybody can bid on it. Large businesses, small businesses, whatever. But if you're a large business, you're in the full and open category. And it might say full and open, on this, or delivery, by the prime or large business can be 90%. And then we need 5% SDB, and then 5% WOSB. And in that situation, you need to know, is that revenue? Is it people? And you need to make sure that you're delivering that 5% from small businesses that have the small disadvantaged business designation, right? And they're delivering that to the contract and through the contract to the customer. So this is why it's so serious to know these things and make sure that you're checking these boxes. So the second one is women-owned small business. And that's obviously, again, at least 51% owned and controlled by one or more women. And the business has to be certified by the Small Business Administration. That's really not hard. And again, you will see women-owned small business as a set-aside specifically. So like I mentioned before, you might see 5% SDB, might see 5% WOSB, or a lot of times you might see a group of them where they say, it has to be 30% SDB, WOSB, SDVOSB, 8A hub zone. You might get all of them, and at least the mix up or the makeup of all of those companies needs to equal 30% of the program cost or something like that. So again, it can be all over the place. There's all kinds of variation on this, but you need to know which ones of these these are. And it's always good as a PM to have these companies in your back pocket, so to speak, so that you're aware when an opportunity comes up within, that you're potentially looking at going after, that hey, I've got this company that I've worked with that I'm comfortable with, and they're a women-owned small business. Great. You've already got the relationship built. You let your contracts and subcontracts administrators work that relationship and bring them onto the team. It's awesome. So again, you'll learn over time for sure in the federal space. You'll have a group and a list of these various companies that fulfill these requirements that, have kind of been vetted. So a lot of times you're not having to go out blind and picking, a company that you may never have worked with before. So, okay, the SDVOSB. This is Service Disabled Veteran Owned Small Business. And again, this is a certified class by the Small Business Administration. It has to be, again, controlled 51%. By one or more, and the same was true of all of these, one person, or they may have multiple people that are controlling, 51% of the organization. In this case, must be service disabled veterans. And that is a specific class and category that is designated by the Small Business Administration. On this one, it's actually done by the VA. There's a certification that occurs in these cases by the Veterans Administration. So small business is also involved, but the VA is also doing some certifications here. I wanted to mention that because this is slightly different. And again, same situation. To qualify for that, you have to be a small business, and then you also have to have some certification elements from the VA. I don't have all the specifics on that, but you will know, and they will have the certifications if they approach you as a service disabled veteran-owned small business. And again, it's fantastic to be able to work with those kinds of companies and give those folks an opportunity to continue to grow their businesses, which I love. And again, you may see contracts that specifically call out 5% SDVOSB, and that's Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business. So again, you have to have those partners and understand what they are. So those are the first three. All right, so the next group, and there's a total of 5. That we're going to go through. There are more, So you may have to learn other ones too, but there can be others that are out there. But I'm going to go through these 5 because these are the ones I've seen on a pretty regular basis. So the next one is something called a hub zone, and in this situation, it's historically underutilized business zone. That's a hub zone, small business. Okay. And this one's interesting because it's got, again, I'm not, certainly not a hub zone expert, but it's really interesting because this is administered by the Small Business Administration. You have to be certified. And generally, the way it works is that the principal office of this company must be located in a designated economically distressed area. And that area is designated as a hub zone by the Small Business Administration, which means their principal office, their main office, needs to reside in that geographic space. And something like usually at least 35% of the staff must also reside in that geographic location. And so, again, the advantage of something like this is when they specify hub zone, a lot of times those hub zones might be close to the service delivery location or a service delivery location. So take advantage of those kinds of things because, again, there's a lot of geographic knowledge and understanding when they are delivered with a principal office in that place and 35% of the staff are in the area. So that can be hugely advantageous when you're delivering, like, let's say, to a customer location that's right there in the same area. Again, these would have designations, that on a contract that would say, we need X% of hub zone small business participation. So again, you'll see these kinds of situations, and they'll be certified. So you won't see a situation where somebody approaches you as a hub zone and you're not sure. It'll be something that will definitely be out there and known. So, all right, hub zone is unique because it's kind of geographic. So the 8A Business Development Program, this one is a little bit interesting because it's going to seem very, very similar to the economically disabled, economically disadvantaged small business that we talked about as one of the very first ones. So if we go back, this small disadvantaged business, the 8A is going to sound very similar to that, except that this is a program that is administered by the Small Business Administration. And it's a program for businesses that are owned or controlled 51% of the stake by individuals that are categorized in socially and economically disadvantaged categories, okay, by the Small Business Administration. But in this case, the 8A program actually provides really interesting and cool benefits. A lot of times there'll be training available, technical assistance. There's access to government contracting opportunities because these are really ones that you hear of quite a bit. 8A set-asides is what you'll hear, and that's for essentially these small disadvantaged businesses that are participating in the 8A program are the only ones that can go after that particular opportunity, or you have to have that capability on your team at a certain percentage. And again, like what we're talking about here, and to keep in the back of your mind, is if you are looking to start your own business and you fall into one of these categories, you should absolutely understand these and take advantage of them, because what it does is it really compresses the pool of available competitors. And so you have a much greater shot at winning because there's going to be a much smaller pool. There's going to be a lot fewer people that are going to be competing with you. And also, if you're in one of these categories, a large business is going to be more likely to have a discussion with you and listen to you and connect with you. So if you're looking to start a business or run something like this, and you have and fall into these classifications, please take advantage of them, because again, I think these are all great programs that are being delivered, and I think they're great opportunities for these small businesses to grow. So again, with the 8A development program, they actually also have mentor-protege situations in the 8A program, which I've certainly heard of before, and I was mentioning earlier, where a large business might be a mentor and to a protege in an 8A. And you can also have, again, like these small businesses, these 8As can be subcontractors, suppliers, partners. There can be all kinds of different relationships with these 8As, but a lot of times these opportunities are set aside specifically for them and them alone. So it's always interesting to see how those things work out. So those are the subcategories that fall within small businesses. So basically what we wanted to do tonight was to go through some of the terms that you're going to hear when you are looking at new opportunities, or if you're brought into a contract and as you're reading through your contract, you've heard me say this on one of my first videos is, as a PM, the number one thing you have to do is know your contract, know your contract, know your contract. It is the number one thing. You have to read it, have the darn thing almost memorized. And in that contract, there will be clauses or notifications that illustrate what requirements that contract might have specifically for small business set-asides. And also, I will say this, if that contract falls within a contract vehicle, there also may be flow down clauses from the vehicle that has some specific set-asides. So again, this is why you need a contract specialist, and you need to be working with a subcontracts administrator to make sure that you're checking all of these boxes to understand what is the contract or the contract vehicle requiring of us as we deliver this. And I need to make sure that I hit these numbers for these small businesses with particular work share to make sure that we're compliant with the requirements for those particular contract vehicles. And I can tell you that I've had as many as 9 or 10 subcontractors, and of those, most of them were small businesses. I've had contracts that had no set-asides, but we still had small businesses as part of it because the contract might not have a set-aside, but there might be a target goal on a contract vehicle that your company is trying to hit. I've been in that situation before. So that means that you bring subcontractors that are small businesses on because you want to contribute to that target percentage on the contract vehicle. So again, a lot of times you're going to be dealing with small businesses as subcontractors. And so you need to be aware of what these pieces are. So that's a brief overview. I hope it was helpful. As I mentioned before, you need to talk to the folks in your organization that are the experts in contract rules, also your legal departments and subcontractor leads, because there is an enormous amount of legal elements underneath all of these. And when I say that, you have to understand what the law or the FAR has as far as requirements go. And you may not know that as a PM. You may need help to understand what those things are. But as I mentioned in the beginning, not only do you need to understand how these things work from a perspective of set-asides, right? Where, the contract needs us to have a certain percentage of small businesses, a certain percent of women-owned small businesses, or service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses, or 8A set-asides. You have to know that, but then you also need to know what specialists and capabilities does that small business bring to the organization. Like, so for example, like I mentioned, we deliver IT services, or I've been in primarily contracts that deliver IT services. So I might have somebody that is a really good, cabling company, and I'm just throwing it out there. And that, okay, so they do cabling. Well, I'm not going to give them a computer technician service desk job, because they're a cabling company, right? So you got to make sure that you understand what their specialties are, so that you can, again, assign them, labor categories and groups that match up with that. So again, you need to know what they deliver, how they deliver it, and then, like I said before, where they deliver it, and any other requirements or concerns that they may have. Because I've been in, I've actually had conversations with subcontractors that kind of went like this, where, you deliver a broad set of services, but right now you actually have a couple of really good X, Y, and Z. So yeah, let's tap into those when we're doing our staffing plan, because either these may be hard to get employees in a particular specialty, or they may be really high expensive going rate people, or they may be really high gross margin people. These are all good things that you want to be able to have delivered from your partners. So yeah, those are the kinds of things you're going to want to be having these discussions with your small businesses. And the last thing that I'll say too is, in certain situations, large businesses have requirements for when they pay their subcontractors, and also when they invoice the government, those things need to be really smooth. I'm just mentioning it because as a PM, you have to make sure, hey, are the invoices working out okay? You need to talk to your, generally your procurement lead, or if you have a financial controller that is helping you work with them, you need to have those discussions on a pretty regular basis, because I've certainly run into situations where, invoices got held up because one of our partners had not invoiced us, so we couldn't invoice the government. So be aware of that. That's a huge situation when you're dealing with subcontractors, is they've got to charge you before you can get the money from the government, and vice versa. And a lot of times there's requirements for you to get paid quickly from the federal government, and also from your company may have requirements for days outstanding sales. So it might be 45 days that you need to bill the government for anything that's happened, within 45 days. And if you've got a 45-day agreement with your small business, then you might constantly be missing that number, because they deliver it to you, you have to evaluate it, and then you've got to submit it to combine it with yours and then submit it to the government. So again, subcontractors are fantastic. Partners, any number of relationships with suppliers and other companies are always going to be part of your life as a federal program manager. So I hope this was helpful. Again, connect with the experts in your companies if you got questions on these things. Get up to speed with what the federal acquisition regulation requirements are, the FAR clauses that apply to these kinds of things. Just be aware of what they are, because again, you might be able to avoid the challenge that I had, where I spent so much time creating a staffing plan and it all went out the window because I wasn't aware that this particular small business could not deliver in a particular state. So I hope all that was helpful. If you have any questions or concerns, please throw them in either the chat or the comment section down below. I do read all of them, and I would be happy to respond to you. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we do this every Thursday night, so please feel free to stop by. We have rotating, content, everything from what it's like to be a federal program manager to emerging technologies and cool new things that are on the horizon. Also, we try to listen to any comments and requests that we have. So if there's something you specifically would like to know about, we're happy to share that as well. And also, certainly, if you've got feedback on the content or information that you can share with the group that would help all of us, please do that as well. So again, if you liked the content, please consider liking this and also subscribe. As I mentioned, we'll be delivering this content every Thursday. There'll be live streams, and then the content will be cut down and provided as videos. And there's a playlist on the channel called How To that goes through a lot of these videos from a program management perspective. So again, these streams and videos are designed to help new and upcoming program managers, and even program managers that have been in the space for a long time. I think it's very hard and challenging sometimes for program managers to find and connect with folks that are dealing with the same things they are. A lot of times it can be a very isolating position at the top of a big program. So hopefully this is number one, showing you that you're not alone, and that you are dealing with a lot of things that other program managers are dealing with, and that you will get through it and you'll be able to continue to deliver success. So until next time, keep learning, listening, and leading. Thank you.